Hello there. Wait a second. Got to turn my Bluetooth speaker off, otherwise the audio will be... Okay. Hello there. Welcome to another one of my YouTube videos. I've been sleeping most of the day today. Which isn't really very good. I feel a bit like I'm being poisoned with radiation. But anyway, that aside, I just stumbled across a quite engaging bit of research and art about God, they give you loads of notifications now, don't they? About meritocracy. Meritocracy is the idea, if you're not familiar with the term, that the brightest and most intellectual people will naturally sort of percolate to positions of authority and government and things which will have a defining factor in the shaping of our collective societies and communities, and things which are important for us to have the brightest brains working on, rather than the wealthiest or the most nepotistically connected, or maybe just the most corrupt and ruthless people might sometimes rise to power if you have a situation which has an abstraction of meritocracy. So here's a bit of research from the internet all about meritocracy. Let's have a look at that. I'll read that to you, and then you can bring a Geiger counter to my room and see if I'm irradiated, but I don't think I am. Well, I do think I know that I am, but I can't prove it. So yeah, bring your Geiger counter along. And well done to everybody for the way you treated the Magenta 2.0 framework, like a bunch of rabid dogs, hyenas, or maybe sort of vultures picking over a carcass. Yeah, I tried to sort of stick up for you all, the powers that be, but they didn't agree that I was within my rights to try and justify your behaviour, unfortunately. Anyway, the meritocracy paradox. This dude says that meritocracy is going to be sort of an anathema to economic growth. So I thought I'd bounce around the idea of meritocracy being important, but economic growth actually, conversely, not being a factor, which is sort of like proscribed in terms of its necessity in most economic societies and communities similar to the UK, where we have both fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. When you try to institute 3% economic growth over 100 years without removing fiat currency or fractional reserve banking, you get an absolute clusterfuck of an economy. So let's see where this guy claims that economic growth is at risk because of the lack of meritocracy, but then also conversely look at the juxtaposition of the way that meritocracy is vitally important. So we should have the brightest people, the most well-intentioned people, the people with the best brains and the best intentions. The most intelligent should be the cream of the crop in every Western society. They should be the people in charge. What have we got? We got pituitary, greedy, insubordinate, supine, corrupt, fingers in pies, arse-licking, cock-sucking, vapid parasites who control our society and pretty much run the world. And there's lots of books on that. Don't take my word for it. By all means, read some international relations and foreign policy material, and you'll find that Western foreign policy for the last 50 years anyway has just been a clusterfuck of resource desperation and genocide, basically. Which sucks quite a bit. Yeah. The meritocracy paradox, navigating social decay and social renewal in a debt-based world. So there is a glittering, deeply optimistic narrative that beats at the heart of modern democratic societies, a foundational myth that has driven unprecedented human achievement and dismantled centuries of rigid aristocratic privilege. It is the concept of meritocracy, which is the inspiring proposition that an individual's trajectory in life should not be determined by the arbitrary lottery of birth, bloodline, or inherited wealth, but rather by the sheer force of their own talent, ambition, and relentless effort. For generations, this ideal has fueled technological renaissances, generated spectacular social economic mobility, and provided a compelling moral justification for the distribution of wealth, status, and influence across the globe. Meritocracy, in its purest theoretical form, is a profound celebration of human agency and capability. Yet, as the 21st century matures, a profound and unsettling dissonance has emerged between this glittering ideal and the lived reality of the global populace. Across the developed world, societies that most fervently champion meritocratic principles are increasingly succumbing to symptoms of severe structural decay. These symptoms manifest as skyrocketing economic inequality, deep political polarization, systemic dysfunction, and sluggish, highly concentrated economic growth. The promise of universal upward mobility has for many calcified into an immovable barrier, leaving populations searching for explanations and pointing fingers at the usual suspects: globalization, technological displacement, or partisan gridlock. However, a far more provocative and paradigm-shifting diagnosis has emerged from the very epicenter of the elite establishment in a widely discussed presentation hosted on some TV channel in March this year in partnership with Audio Note. The prominent Yale legal scholar Daniel Markovits posited a radical thesis. He said that it's not the failure to achieve meritocracy that's driving societal dysfunction, but rather the flawless, ruthless execution of meritocracy itself. Markovits argues that the mechanisms originally designed to democratize opportunity have mutated into an inescapable corrosive trap, one that devours the elite with crushing psychological and professional pressure, while simultaneously alienating, humiliating, and disenfranchising the broad middle class. To comprehend the full magnitude of this crisis and chart an upbeat, constructive path forward towards social renewal, we must look beyond the sociological architecture of elite universities and corporate hierarchies. We must examine the underlying macroeconomic engine that sets the relentless pace of the modern world. The exhausting pursuit of merit is inextricably linked to a global financial system predicated on fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. In a system where money is created primarily through interest-bearing debt, perpetual economic growth is not merely an ambitious policy goal, it's a strict mathematical imperative required to stave off systemic collapse. This relentless structural demand for infinite expansion fundamentally alters the nature of human labour, transforming the noble pursuit of excellence into a hyper-competitive rat race that accelerates professional burnout and societal exhaustion. Yet, abandoning the concept of merit entirely carries catastrophic risks, threatening to plunge society backwards into the dark ages of nepotism, incompetence, and entrenched caste systems. The rationale for meritocracy remains deeply embedded in the mechanisms of human flourishing, technological process, and basic fairness. The challenge, therefore, is not to discard the concept of rewarding excellence, but to embark on a profound project of social renewal. This requires a complete re-evaluation of our values, a deliberate decision about what we choose to stand for, and the engineering of a future that honours human dignity and talent without chaining them to unsustainable demands of infinite economic expansion. This deep journalistic investigation, I've just woken up, explores the intricate architecture of the meritocracy trap, the macroeconomic treadmill that powers it, the vital necessity of preserving merit-based systems, and the optimistic blueprint for a society that fosters genuine, sustainable prosperity. So the architect of the critique, Daniel Markovits, and the behavioural lens. So to fully appreciate the nuance of the attack on meritocratic ideal, one must first understand the intellectual pedigree of its most forceful modern critic. Daniel Markovits is the Guido Calabrese Professor of Law at Yale Law School, where he serves as the founding director of the Centre for the Study of Private Law. His scholarship is distinguished by an extraordinarily broad interdisciplinary reach, operating at the complex intersections of the philosophical foundations of private law, moral and political philosophy, and behavioural economics. Markovits is a quintessential insider to the very system he critiques, having traversed the highest echelons of elite academia, earning a BA in mathematics, summa cum laude from Yale, studying econometrics and mathematical economics at the London School of Economics as a British Marshall Scholar, and obtaining a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Oxford before returning to Yale for law. He possesses an intimate, first-hand understanding of the corrosive system that governs the modern American elite. His academic worldview is largely defined by the synthesis of abstract legal theory with the tangible, often irrational realities of human behaviour. In his seminal textbook, Contracts, Law, Theory and Practice, co-authored with Gabriel Rottenberg, Markovits sets to present a basic doctrine of contracts, not merely as a set of rigid legal rules, but as a living framework deeply entwined with economics, sociology and philosophy. He explores how legal orderings engage the human instinct for sociality, arguing that even in highly competitive interactions such as contracts between self-interested buyers and sellers or litigation between adversaries, there exists an immanent logic of reciprocal recognition, good faith and respect. His extensive bibliography, including works like Diversity and Distrust and Liberal Virtues, showcases a lifelong commitment to understanding how institutions shape civic virtue and community in a liberal constitutional democracy. This deep, nuanced understanding of behavioural economics and human incentives heavily informs his perspective on societal structures. Markovits recognises that individuals make systematic, recognisable errors in judgment, a fundamental premise of behavioural economics that has revolutionised modern policymaking. In a fascinating 2015 study published in the prestigious Journal of Science, Markovits, along with Raymond Fissman, Pamela Jakilia, and Shekhar Kariv, hope I pronounced that right, examined the distributional preferences of an elite cadre of Yale Law School students, a group statistically destined to assume positions of immense power and influence in US society. The research revealed that these elite subjects were significantly less fair-minded and substantially more efficiency-focused than a diverse representative sample of the American public drawn from the American Life Panel. They exhibited a profound meritocratic illusion. So what he describes as a self-serving, deeply ingrained belief that their high status was an accurate reflection of their innate ability and desert, whatever that means. This illusion allows the elite to expand less cognitive effort processing information that might undermine their self-image as inherently deserving, leading them to prioritise economic efficiency and output over egalitarian distribution. So you've got a chart here. The first column says distributional preferences, elite versus general public. And then we've got another one that says elite cohort, Yale students. Then you've got general public from the American Life Panel, whatever the fuck that is. But the first one, focus on efficiency for the elite, was considered to be substantially higher and prioritising maximising total output and merit-based allocation. However, for the general public, it was lower, more willing to sacrifice total output for equitable distribution. This might not make sense to you yet, but it will in a bit. So the second row in the column is fair-mindedness. a bit of an ambiguous term, isn't it? But this is Google for you. Quantifiably lower, heavily influenced by the meritocratic illusion of the deserved status, is the opinion of the elite cohort of Yale students. But the American Life panel said it was higher, more attuned to systemic inequalities and the role of luck or circumstance. Finally, at the bottom, we've got career trajectory prediction. Equally minded outliers within the elite cohort are significantly more likely to pursue non-profit employment. General public preferences are more distributed across various sectors without extreme concentration. So anyway, cracking on with this mindfuck, this empirical understanding of elite psychology serves as the bedrock for his broader societal critique. So Markovits suggests that the technocratic imposition of policies by unrepresentative, efficiency-obsessed experts is inherently flawed. In collaboration with Professor Zachary D. Liskell, he advocates for democratic law and economics, a paradigm that informs representative samples of ordinary people about policy evidence and empowers them to make decisions, rather than relying solely on skewed, highly insulated perspectives of the meritocratic elite. It's through this empathetic lens of distributive justice, behavioural realism, and the desire for genuine social renewal that Markovits dissects the grand American myth in his provocative work, The Meritocracy Trap. So the anatomy of the meritocracy trap, a mechanism of societal decay. When the British sociologist Michael Young, you might have to Google him, he's quite an interesting guy, coined the term meritocracy in his 1958 satirical novel, The Rise of the Meritocracy, it was intended not as a blueprint for utopia, but actually as a dire dystopian warning. Young envisioned a future specifically looking forward to the year 2034, where social rank was determined strictly by the formula of IQ plus effort, predicting that such a system would inevitably engender a few insufferably smug elite who believed their dominance was scientifically and morally justified. Simultaneously, this system would condemn the lower classes to a state of internalized inferiority, stripping them of the psychological consolations of the past. To Young's profound dismay, the term was rapidly co-opted by politicians across the spectrum, from Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher to Tony Blair and Barack Obama, and stripped of its irony, becoming the universally lauded standard for a just society. For decades, meritocracy was championed as the ultimate engine of social mobility, the precise egalitarian antidote to the hereditary aristocracies of the past, where jobs, status and wealth simply fell into the laps of those who won the lottery of birth. In its early years, the meritocratic shift did in fact open the gates of the elite to outsiders, substituting the primacy of aristocratic breeding with the primacy of capacity and effort. It was a deeply liberating ideal that sought out the smartest and hardest working individuals from all corners of society. However, as Markovits exhaustively documents, this system has calcified. The meritocracy trap is now the single greatest obstacle to equal opportunities, operating as a highly efficient, self-replicating mechanism for the concentration and dynastic transmission of wealth, privilege and caste across generations. Rather than aiding social mobility, the intense focus on credentialism and specialised skills has created a new aristocracy that's arguably more entrenched than the one it replaced. Sorry, they just came to do mobs there. The decay wrought by meritocracy manifests as a devastating bimodal crisis that harms both the absolute winners and the absolute losers of the economic game. The expulsion and humiliation of the middle class. So the most visible casualty of the meritocratic era is the working and middle class. Markovits defines this group broadly as working people without formal elite degrees, or professional accreditations, encompassing everyone from unionised auto workers to mid-level regional managers. As the global labour market has evolved, spurred by technological changes that dramatically increase the economic returns to the precise hyper-specialised skills produced by elite universities, the middle class has been systematically expelled from the charismatic centre of economic social life. The avenues that once carried individuals from modest circumstances into prosperity are narrowing dramatically. Ordinary public schools lag disastrously behind elite private institutions, and middle-class families simply cannot afford the elaborate, hyper-competitive educational regimens that wealthy families procure to ensure their children's success. The resulting labour market is deeply segregated, offering a stark divide between the gloomy jobs relegated to less educated workers, often characterised by stagnant wages, precarity, whatever that is. I'm not very smart at that word. I can't, a bit embarrassing really. Precarity, what does that mean? I don't know. Google it, please. Answers on the postcard. PO box. Jog the fuck on. And a lack of benefits, and the highly lucrative glossy roles captured almost exclusively by the credentialed. It's another word I don't know. Elite. It doesn't happen very often. It's a good day for me. At 2 Ivy League colleges, data indicates that the share of students from the top income quintile exceeds the bottom 2 quintiles combined by a ratio of 3.5 to 1, while at other elite schools, more students come from the top 1% than the entire bottom half of the income distribution. This dynamic fosters a profound psychological and political damage. Those who lose out in the meritocratic struggle are subtly conditioned by a pervasive ideology to view their lower status as a personal failing. When a society ceaselessly preaches that anyone can make it if they simply try hard enough, the implicit corollary is that those who do not make it are in some way deficient, lazy, or untalented. This phenomenon is explored deeply by Harvard political theorist Michael Sandel in his book The Tyranny of Merit. Sandel argues that the moral basis of meritocracy works against the common good by facilitating the humiliation of those at the lower end of the social structure. It strips the disadvantage of the consolidations of luck or systemic bias, fueling a deep, simmering resentment against the establishment. The belief in a just world allows the successful to accept vast inequalities as deserved, providing false hope to those with less opportunity and severely damaging self-esteem of those who fall behind. This toxic cocktail of internalized inadequacy and societal humiliation regularly erupts into populist political dysfunction, seducing the middle class to resent the establishment while the elite cling to their prerogatives. The devouring of the elite, a cycle of self-exploitation. If the meritocracy oppresses the middle class, it's surprisingly vicious to its victors, unlike the hereditary aristocrats of the Gilded Age who prided themselves on their leisure, actively disdained manual labour, and lived off passive landholdings. The modern meritocratic elite are bound to their wealth through the relentless grinding exploitation of their own human capital. Because their status is derived from their specialised skills and intensive training, they can only extract a return on their massive educational investments by working with staggering, unceasing intensity. Markovits notes that meritocracy turns life for the elite into an endless, agonising competition. The race begins in early childhood with admission to the most prestigious preschools, often being statistically more competitive than Ivy League colleges, admitting fewer than 10% of the applicants. This escalates through the teenage years into a pressure cooker of standardised testing, resume building, advanced placement classes, and pharmaceutical enhancements required to maximise performance. Rich children enter a grueling educational regimen that results in record high rates of anxiety and depression among young adults. So once they enter the labour force, these victors face brutal up or out promotion policies in law firms, investment banks, and management consultancies. They must work 80 to 100 hours a week, ruthlessly exploiting their own educations to secure their precarious perch at the top of the corporate pyramid. I can't be fucked with this chart. I'm just going to read you what it says. It still makes the same thing. So the elite are incredibly wealthy, but they're also deeply anxious, alienated, and exhausted. They're trapped in a system that demands enormous quantities of effectively alienated labour, transforming them into highly compensated human resources whose primary function is to feed a macroeconomic machine that demands relentless output. This brings us to the underlying structural forces that make this a rat race, not just a cultural phenomenon, but a mathematical inevitability. The macroeconomic treadmill, fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. To fully grasp why meritocracy has evolved into such a punishing, inescapable gauntlet of hyper-competition, one must look far beyond the sociological structures of universities and corporate workplaces. The behavioural demands placed upon the modern workforce are inextricably linked to the core design of the global finance system, specifically the reliance on fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. The meritocratic obsession with unceasing productivity, limitless ambition, and exponential individual output is a direct, unavoidable mirror for a monetary system that requires infinite economic expansion simply to remain solvent. It's completely unsustainable. It's mental. It's mad. It's bollocks. It's shit. It's a crap system. And it will fuck all of us with a big dick of consequence without any lube if we leave it for too long. The mechanics of the endogenous money creation. So in modern global economies, money is not a static representation of stored value backed by a physical commodity like gold or silver. Rather, the vast majority of the money supply, often referred to as broad money, is created endogenously by commercial banks through the issuance of debt. That might sound mad, but it's true. Under the fractional reserve banking system, when a commercial bank issues a loan, whether for a mortgage, a corporate expansion, or a student's elite education, it does not merely transfer existing funds from a depositor's vault to the borrower. Instead, it creates new digital money, entering numbers into a computer system, crediting the borrower's account, and expanding the overall money supply out of thin air. Now, while textbook models of fractional reserve banking often suggest that this practice is strictly limited by a reserve requirement, for instance, a 10% rule that dictates banks can only expand the money supply up to 10 times of the amount of base money they've got. That gets a bit complicated. If you want to Google base money, go ahead. The reality of modern finance is vastly more permissive and complex. So in jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, sorry, I kind of forgot what I was doing then. In jurisdictions like the United Kingdom, the required reserve ratio has historically been reduced to zero, placing no hard, neutral mathematical limit on how rapidly banks can create money through lending. Regulatory frameworks like the Basel Accords focus primarily on capital adequacy to prevent bank failures when loans go bad, rather than placing hard limits on the dangerous expansion of the money supply during economic booms. Furthermore, the proliferation of asset-backed securities has fundamentally altered the landscape. So securitization allows banks to package and sell loans on to entities outside the commercial banking system, effectively removing the financial consequences of loan defaults from the original issuers and allowing debt instruments to form part of the equity capital reserves. This has led to an unregulated, dangerously destabilizing growth in both money and loan supplies, unmoored from the genuine physical constraints of the real economy. So you can buy loads of packages of debts, basically, as an investment banker. The mathematical impossibility of perpetual growth. So this debt-based mechanism contains a profound systemic structural flaw. When a loan is generated, the bank creates the principal amount, but it does not create the money required to pay the interest on that loan. Consequently, there's always fundamentally more debt in the macroeconomic system than there is money available to repay it. So for borrowers to successfully service their interest obligations without triggering massive cascading systemic defaults, they must constantly acquire additional funds from the existing money supply. This dynamic dictates an inescapable reality. The total debt in the system must continually grow, driving a perpetual exponential accumulation of debt that outpaces the expansion of the monetary base. Therefore, the overall economic activity of a nation must continuously expand. If the economy ceases to grow, the ability of individuals and corporations to service compounding interest collapses, triggering severe financial crisis, bankruptcies, and deflationary spirals. Most mainstream economists posit that developed nations require an average sustainable growth rate of about 3% to simply maintain equilibrium and prevent the debt structure from imploding. However, the concept of that in perpetual exponential economic growth on a planet with finite resources, which of course we do have, ecological boundaries and bounded human energy, is highly contested and arguably mathematically impossible over a long enough timeline. So theories of ecological economics alongside steady state or degrowth models argue that attempting to force infinite expansion inevitably leads to the financialization and commodification of nature, severe environmental degradation, and the relentless, unsustainable exploitation of human labour. A banking system that requires infinite growth structurally embeds instability, leading to inevitable boom and bust credit cycles and an increasing concentration of wealth among those who command the mechanisms of capital and asset valuation. So as the money supply expands to service old debts, purchasing power of uninvested fiat currency naturally erodes, a phenomenon often mischaracterized merely as a collapse in confidence, which acts as a powerful systemic signal designed to force capital and, by extension, human labour constantly back to work. I'm just going to get my flask and fill it up with juice. I've got a really dry mouth. And now I've got to phone fucking James back. He'll probably be getting pissed at home or out beating everybody at pool. Just a second. I could have just paused it then, couldn't I? Could have just paused the recording, not let you sit through me going to get a fucking drink, having a toke on my vape. But c'est la vie. That's the dark nature of capitalism, guys. Burnout at the epicenter, the financial sector's exodus. So, just gonna have a drink of this. That's just what the doctor orders. Gonna have a toke of this as well. Right. The implications of this macroeconomic architecture for the individual worker are profound, directly fueling the very meritocratic trap Markowitz describes. To outpace the inherent inflation of a debt-based system, individuals must generate increasingly higher nominal returns. Now, it says this dynamic acts as the invisible whip driving the meritocratic rat race, the grinding intensity required of the elite, that is the relentless pursuit of credentials, the 100-hour work weeks. It's not solely a product of cultural ambition, it's an economic necessity demanded by a system that must extract higher ever yields to service astronomical levels of corporate, personal and national debt. The national debt's the main bad bit. Unsurprisingly, this relentless pressure results in an epidemic of professional exhaustion, particularly visible at the very epicenters of this financial engine. In the banking and financial services sectors, the institutions responsible for managing this debt-based expansion, burnout has reached crisis levels. Recent industry studies, such as the comprehensive report by the digital accountancy platform Lemon Edge, demonstrate that massive cohorts of finance professionals are actively planning to abandon their roles due to unsustainable pressure, heavy workloads, and profound emotional exhaustion. The data is startling. Nearly a third, 31% of banking and finance professionals are planning to leave their current roles as a direct result of high pressure, with an impending exodus threatening to drain valuable talent from the sector in record numbers. Over 42% of workers in private capital, venture capital and banking cite heavy workloads as the primary contributor to their heightened stress, with nearly a quarter expressing deep concerns about their physical or mental health. Overall, 1 in 6 professionals feel that they can no longer continue in the industry, a figure that rises to 21% among male respondents. When the financial stress of debt accumulation intersects with meritocratic demand for perpetual outperformance, it creates an environment of intense psychological distress. The meritocracy trap, therefore, is fully actualised and supercharged by a macroeconomic system that transforms the noble pursuit of human excellence into an inescapable, exhausting treadmill of endless wealth extraction. The winners of the meritocracy have indeed won the game, but they are trapped on a treadmill that continually accelerates, fueled by the compounding interest of a fiat economy. Unyielding vitality of meritocracy, an upbeat rebuttal. Given the devastating psychological toll of the meritocratic trap, the structural inequalities it entrenches, and the exhausting realities of debt-driven growth, it's deeply tempting to view the entire concept of meritocracy as a failed dystopian experiment. However, a nuanced, objective understanding of societal progress requires us to acknowledge that the foundational principles of meritocracy remain utterly vital to the survival, innovation, and fairness of any modern civilization. To abandon meritocracy is to invite a catastrophic regression. The upbeat case for meritocracy is rooted in a fundamental appreciation for human agency, freedom, and the historical arc of justice. Prior to the widespread adoption of meritocratic ideals, human societies were overwhelmingly governed by nepotism, aristocratic birthrights, and the rigid, inescapable caste systems. Influence, resource allocation, and political power were determined strictly by the fortuitous circumstances of lineage, trapping brilliant minds in perpetual poverty and elevating incompetent heirs to positions of supreme authority. The transition towards merit-based evaluation was a monumental leap forward for human civilization. The Eastern meritocratic tradition, rooted in the philosophy of Confucius and actualized through the imperial examinations in China, was designed to shift power away from noble blood and towards virtue and talent, ensuring that leaders served as sage decision makers. In the West, Enlightenment thinkers like Thomas Jefferson forcefully advocated for a natural aristocracy based on talent rather than wealth and birth, viewing it as the most precious gift for a stable, effective, and fair governance of society, a catalyst for innovation and prosperity. When executed faithfully and decoupled from artificial scarcity, meritocracy is the ultimate catalyst for human flourishing and economic vitality. By establishing a transparent paradigm where rewards, status, and advancement are directly correlated with an individual's talent, skill, and effort, society generates an immensely powerful positive incentive structure. Individuals are motivated to innovate, to take calculated entrepreneurial risks, and to push the boundaries of their own capabilities. History is replete with evidence of societies experiencing spectacular renaissances where merit is systematically recognised and rewarded. The rapid world-changing technological advancements forged in the laboratories of Silicon Valley, the astounding post-war economic miracles of Germany and Japan, and the unprecedented acceleration of global scientific and medical discovery over the past century are all testaments to the power of meritocratic allocation. When individuals believe that the system is genuinely fair, that their hard work will yield tangible, objective results, they exhibit higher resilience, ambition, and a willingness to engage in competitive endeavours, not out of fear, but out of a genuine desire for self-actualisation and societal contribution. As Adam Smith observed, harnessing human self-interest through competitive merit-based systems often drives the engine of productivity, lifting all boats in a rising tide of general prosperity. The next bit is entitled Competence, Efficiency, and Human Respect. It goes on to read, furthermore, A society that discards meritocracy risks systemic, highly dangerous incompetence. The functionalist sociological perspective argues that social inequality, when strictly based on achievement and capability, is an unconsciously evolved device ensuring that the most critical, complex positions in a society are filled by the most highly qualified persons. Whether designing critical infrastructure, operating commercial aircraft, performing complex neurological surgeries, or formulating global monetary policy, it's an undeniable existential societal imperative that the most competent individuals lead. Efficiently matching specific talents to complex roles maximizes optimal productivity and ensures that society operates safely and effectively. Crucially, meritocracy is fundamentally an ideology of profound respect for the individual. By focusing relentlessly on qualifications rather than arbitrary demographic categories such as race, gender, or social class, merit-based selection treats humans as genuine agents whose purposeful acts can make a tangible difference in the world. It explicitly rejects the fatalism of class and caste, maintaining the classic liberal dream that anyone, regardless of their starting point, can author their own destiny. The modern immigrant narrative, for instance, relies heavily on the profound belief that merit will be the ultimate arbiter of success, allowing marginalised individuals to escape poverty, overcome discrimination, and flourish in new environments. To abandon the practices of merit and fairness in the pursuit of pure equity risks alienating the very individuals who rely on objective standards to prove their worth against entrenched biases. The contemporary critics of meritocracy, including Markowitz and Sandel, do not necessarily despise the concept of rewarding genuine excellence. Rather, they are critiquing a highly corrupted, weaponized implementation of it. The current system has allowed the merit of the elite to be bought, hoarded, and dynastically transferred through vastly unequal access to early education, exclusive networks, and inherited social capital. If we abandon the ideal of meritocracy entirely, out of frustration with its current flaws, we invite a terrifying regression. Without meritocracy, privileged backgrounds gain an unchecked, fundamentally unfair advantage, resulting in the total cessation of social mobility and the entrenchment of a neo-feudal order. Bit dark. The objective, therefore, must not be the destruction of meritocracy, but its radical rescue, purification, and democratization. A blueprint for social renewal, re-evaluating our values. If meritocracy is indispensable for societal progress and human dignity, yet its current iteration is driving profound dysfunction and epidemic burnout, the path forward necessitates a structural and philosophical paradigm shift. Daniel Markowitz proposes that true social renewal requires a complete, courageous re-evaluation of our values, a collective decision about what we choose to stand for, and the implementation of a deliberate systemic policy mechanism, or of systemic policy mechanisms, plural, to reverse the feedback loops that currently drive inequality. Escaping the meritocracy trap demands systemic reform across education, the labour market, and our fundamental cultural definition of success. Revolutionising education, dismantling the technologies of exclusion. The current architecture of elite education operates as a technology of exclusion, meticulously designed to filter out the vast majority of society while laundering the inherited privileges of the wealthy into the appearance of earned merit. To achieve meaningful social renewal, Markowitz advocates for a dramatic structural expansion of access. He proposes that elite universities and private preparatory institutions should be compelled to double or even triple their student capacities. This is not merely a call for token diversity, but a structural dilution of artificial exclusivity. By radically increasing the number of available seats and ensuring these new slots are filled by individuals from outside the entrenched economic elite, the intense life or death competitive pressure surrounding admissions would significantly deflate. Broader, less competitive, and more inclusive admissions policies would dismantle the scarcity that currently drives the elite to subject their children to grueling, anxiety-inducing educational regimens, thereby lowering the temperature of the societal pressure cooker for both the wealthy and the middle class. It would transform universities from exclusive sorting mechanisms back into engines of widespread human development. Restructuring the labour market, empowering the wide middle. Education reform, however, is entirely insufficient without a corresponding revolution in how the macroeconomic system values, compensates and taxes human labour. Currently, the tax code and regulatory environment perversely incentivise the eradication of the middle class. Because of the specific antiquated structures of income and social security wage taxes, middle class labour is often the highest tax factor of production, actively encouraging corporate entities to replace mid-skilled workers with automation, robots, or a tiny fraction of super-skilled, hyper-elite executives. And that's more fame now. That was good, wasn't it? Have another one. Anyway, goes on to say Markowitz insists on reversing these regressive incentives. Social renewal requires shifting the focus of economic production back towards the centre, actively and unapologetically favouring middle-class, mid-skilled labour by altering tax and regulatory frameworks to favour the middle class over super-skilled workers and robots. Governments can incentivise technological innovation that complements and enhances the productivity of mid-skilled workers rather than rendering them obsolete. Furthermore, entire industries must be systematically reimagined to distribute responsibility and reduce the dangerous reliance on hyper-specialised elites. Markowitz highlights the healthcare sector as a prime candidate for such renewal. Rather than relying exclusively on vastly expensive, super elite, hyper specialised physicians, society could empower a broad base of cost effective, widely dispersed mid skilled workers such as dental technicians, personal trainers, yoga teachers, and advanced nurse practitioners to deliver routine care, monitor public health, for example, blood pressure and heart rate monitoring, and execute vital services at a fraction of the cost with vastly greater accessibility. This bit's about redefining success and mitigating the rat race. At a corporate level, businesses must actively move away from the grinding intensity of the 80 to 100 hour work week that currently defines elite status and drives industry-wide burnout. Markowitz points to international models such as the German banking and legal sectors, which consistently achieve high-quality outcomes utilising a broader base of less elite, less highly paid workers who log significantly fewer hours and experience far less psychological distress. Domestically, companies that focus on upskilling their workforce, investing heavily in training and paying robust wages to mid-level employees, akin to the highly successful operational model of Costco, if you've heard of them, demonstrate that it is entirely possible to achieve high productivity and profitability without engaging in the ruthless de-skilling and exploitation of labour. Ultimately, this profound social renewal involves recognising the inherent fragility, temporality, and inherent worth of the human condition. It requires us to embrace the wide middle of human skill performance, to value mid-level occupations such as teaching and public recreation, and to fundamentally redefine what truly counts as a successful life. We must strip away the pernicious illusion that astronomical wealth equates to moral superiority and firmly reject the notion that a person's dignity is inextricably tethered to their performance on standardised tests or their capacity to generate exponential financial yields in a debt-based economy. Integrating the insights of behavioural economics into this renewal is critical. Rather than relying on a cloistered, unrepresentative technocracy to dictate policy from the top down, the principles of democratic law and economics should be enthusiastically leveraged by transparently presenting the complex trade-offs of the meritocratic system, the delicate balance of efficiency versus equality, two representative samples of the public, societies can forge a new, democratically legitimate and durable consensus on how to construct a fairer world. So this bit is titled Synthesizing the Future, Sustainable Prosperity Beyond the Trap. The intersecting crisis of the modern age, the societal decay meticulously identified by Daniel Markovits, and the macroeconomic exhaustion driven by the compounding demands of debt-based fractional reserve banking paint a daunting, complex picture of the current human trajectory. We have inadvertently constructed a society that demands the mathematically and biologically impossible, infinite exponential economic expansion extracted from a planet with finite physical resources and infinite cognitive and emotional output demanded from finite human beings too. The meritocracy trap is the ultimate sociological manifestation of this broader underlying economic imperative. It is the brilliant, insidious cultural mechanism that convinces individuals to willingly subject themselves to the crushing pressures of a fiat monetary system. It seduces the elite with the glittering illusion of deserved supremacy, binding them to a lifetime of alienated labour, while simultaneously disenfranchising, humiliating and stalling the economic progress of the vast majority. Yet a rigorous, clear-eyed analysis of these dynamics yields an incredibly upbeat and profoundly optimistic conclusion regarding the capacity for human adaptation and societal evolution. The accurate diagnosis of the disease is always the first, most vital step towards a cure. Recognizing that meritocracy has mutated from a liberating egalitarian ideal into a highly efficient mechanism of dynastic transmission empowers us to dismantle the trap, understanding that the frantic, exhausting pace of modern professional life is artificially exacerbated by the mathematical realities of debt-based money creation, allows policymakers to boldly explore stabilising alternatives ranging from steady-state economic principles that prioritise qualitative development over quantitative growth, to more rigorous democratic controls over monetary expansion and capital requirements. Most importantly, the enduring, undeniable necessity of meritocracy is the profound classical liberal belief that talent, effort, and brilliant innovation should be recognised, nurtured, and rewarded. It provides a powerful guiding light for the future. The ultimate goal, it says, of social renewal is not to usher in an era of engineered mediocrity, to punish excellence, or to succumb to the fatalism of pure equity that ignores human agency. Rather, the objective is to decouple the concept of human worth from the ruthless mechanisms of hypercapitalism. Daniel Markovits' forensic deconstruction of the meritocracy trap serves as a vital, optimistic catalyst for a new era of societal design. By laying bare the immense psychological and economic costs borne by both marginalised middle class and the exhausted elite, the narrative forces a long overdue reckoning with the structures we have blindly accepted as fair. When paired with an understanding of the immense pressures exerted by a global financial system reliant on perpetual growth, it becomes clear that true social renewal requires more than superficial, incremental policy tweaks. It demands a profound visionary shift in our collective ethos. We possess the intellect, the resources, and the tools to reverse these destructive feedback loops. By democratising elite education, restructuring global tax codes to champion mid-skilled labour, recognising the limitations of infinite debt-based growth, and fundamentally redefining success to embrace the vast, diverse middle spectrum of human capability, modern societies can forge a highly productive, deeply innovative future. Meritocracy, when rescued from its current corruptions, democratised in its access, and uncoupled from the impossible demands of infinite financial extraction, remains humanity's greatest, most inspiring framework for justice. It holds the ultimate promise of a renewed society where genuine excellence is celebrated, dignity is universally recognised, and the opportunity to flourish is finally truly afforded to all. There's a load of fucking sources there. You can look at some of those if you really can be asked. Just pause the video and I don't know, just look at the sources. yeah. Anyway, that's been my 54-minute presentation on YouTube today. I got some dinner still here. I woke up, my dinner was cold. It's red cabbage and Asian meat, radiation. Somebody was talking about having bought a pill press and just made tablets that have got radioactive isotope bits in it into antipsychotic meds. There's a dude down the corridor who's got like a red t-shirt with like this Asian thing on it as well. It's sort of like radiation. I'll leave you with that. Hopefully nobody sets off a dirty bomb in the Queen Elizabeth line in London, eh? Cheers. Whoops.